All right. Hey there, everyone. Good afternoon, at least uh, east of the Pacific time zone here. Good afternoon here, and welcome to this edition of the MSP Success webinar series. I'm Jeff Johnson, president of MSP Success Magazine. Thrilled to have you on here today. We've got a great topic around EDR, MDR, and everything I think that ends with DR. We're going to be talking about it here during this webinar today. Before we get started, just a couple housekeeping items. One is that I want to point you over to mspmarketingroadshow.com. I'll put that up in the chat. Make sure that you check that out. We've got some really cool things coming this fall. We're going to be in Dallas, not Chicago. I was almost going to say that. Dallas, Newark, New Jersey, and Las Vegas, late August through early October. And we're going to be spending 2 days with MSPs talking all about marketing. One day for the first day of the event is all about how to generate more high-value clients or HVC clients in your MSP business. And so those are the ones that everyone wants more of, wants the ones that listen to them, do everything that they say, pay the most amount of money. We're going to be talking about that full one-day workshop with Robin Robbins, CEO of Technology Marketing Toolkit. Day 2 is super cool. A lot of people are excited about this. AI is the hot topic, and we're doing a deep dive for a full day on how to use AI marketing tools in your business. And we're going to be showing you everything that is new out on the market. And new means it could have been around for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. All of this is coming fast and furious. You got to stay on top of this to be at the top of your game in your marketplace. We're also going to be diving into how you can take content from TMT, from your vendors, from anyone else, spin that into a ton of different types of content on different media. And then lastly on that day, we're going to be walking you through of how you can do a lead generating webinar around AI for clients that then generates leads for your MSP business to be MSP clients. And so mspmarketingroadshow.com is where you want to go for that. I'll post that up in the chat. But before I do that, I'm going to introduce Seth Geftick. Seth is a 20-year veteran of the cybersecurity industry. He's been with Huntress for the last just about for a year here, doing a lot of great things over at Huntress. He's here to show you an insider guide to EDR and MDR. Seth, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, thanks so much, Jeff. And thanks everyone for joining. I appreciate your time, and hopefully you'll get a lot out of this presentation. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the background. We mentioned Jeff said all the DRs. I'm going to very quickly explain what all the DRs are and why they exist, and hopefully that level sets what the topics we're talking about. And then get into some specifics about how to evaluate EDR vendors, determine whether you need an MDR on top of that, and then if so, what you should look for in an MDR vendor. And of course, we're going to leave time for Q&A, so feel free to throw those into the chat as you go along. So I titled this The Insider's Guide to EDR to MDR. So what makes me an insider, and why should you actually listen to me? Well, as Jeff mentioned, I've been doing this for 20 years, which in cybersecurity world, it makes me a complete dinosaur because the industry is relatively new. Most of those 20 years, actually all of those 20 years have been for cybersecurity vendors. And most of the main thing that I do in my role is something called positioning. So trying to figure out what makes the company, in my case, what I work for, what makes them different than our competition, what makes us, where our strengths are, what our weaknesses are, and how to talk about that way. So when you do live in the world of positioning, you tend to understand the market really well, and what is the right solution for the right types of organizations. Throughout those 20 years, and most recently, I've launched all the DRs. So a next-gen AV products, EDR products, XDR products, MDR products, everything in this space has really been my area of focus as well. But again, I still work for a vendor. Obviously, I'm wearing the t-shirt. I got the background. You can see the logo everywhere. I have a Huntress bias when I present because that's my viewpoint of the world, but it's not the only company I've worked for. So my job here, I really want to give you a good viewpoint of EDR and MDR. I'd love it if you end up deciding Huntress is the right solution for you, but I'm also be super happy if I convince a few of you that, hey, this may not be right for you and you should go with someone else. So I will do my best to keep this as vendor neutral as possible until the very end of the presentation. So I mentioned I'm going to give a little bit of background. I realize for a lot of you, this is going to be things you already know, but I find it helpful to lay out how we got to this point where we're even talking about EDR and MDR and what that means. So if you go back, over a decade, everything was just antivirus. And when it came to endpoint protection in our space, which is very signature based at the time, if we know something is bad, we've seen it before, then we block it from coming back in through the door again. Very simple. Over time, this just got untenable, and attackers were able to get around signature-based defenses. So AV companies started to expand their techniques, and this is where the marketing term next-gen AV came, which really was just AV plus behavior-based protection, and maybe a little AI sprinkled in there. Often, sometimes before AI was even a term. So in that case, they're going to look at the DNA of the file or the program trying to run and determine based on that DNA or that behavior of what it's doing, whether it's malicious or not. And this really good endpoint protection, this is still really kind of what we use today as an industry, but we realize endpoint protection at the perimeter is only so strong, right? If you're looking at just automated protection, it's going to miss things. And also there's a lot of gray zones. So there's stuff we know is known good and stuff we know is known bad. But what about everything that falls in the middle? That's where the EDR category came from, right? Look at the things that get past prevention or the thing that needs a smart human to interject in and do that investigation. EDR was built as a toolbox for those smart humans in order to investigate further and make decisions about how to respond. Over time, people wanted to add more visibility and went beyond EDR and added other areas. So that's where XDR came in. I think of XDR as really just EDR plus. There are also SIM vendors out there for marketing reasons have kind of rebranded themselves as XDR. They're really kind of doing the same thing. So it makes some sense, which is we're taking data from a wide variety of sources and then trying to bring it all together and make sense out of it to find bad stuff in that data. And then over time, people said, wow, EDR, XDR are great tools, but I just can't use them. So once you got out of like the top 1% of security orgs, the really most mature orgs out there, people really struggle to get the value of these, what can often be very expensive tools. They also didn't have 24/7 coverage. So they didn't have night, weekend, holiday coverage to actually be monitoring their environment. So the MDR category, managed detection response, was born to take care of that burden off them. So we understand this is hard. Don't worry, you have to sleep, you have a weekend, you're probably overwhelmed. Let us take care of it. So it's an outsourced service to manage those tools. So let's start with EDR and what you need to look for there. So when you think of what are the capabilities and the questions you should be asking for an EDR tool, the first one is what data do you want to look at, right? Do you want to look at just endpoint data or do you want to scope beyond that? And if you want to go beyond endpoint data, the next question I have is what are you going to do with that data, right? Network data is great, but are you going to be able to use that to make any sense? Is it going to find more threats? Or is it something that's just going to actually add more haystack to find your needles in the haystack in that situation? I would say a lot of organizations want the full broad data source input, but very few can actually handle the data and do much with it. The second thing is detection efficacy. So with an EDR tool, part of their secret sauce should be bubbling up things that they find in that gray zone or things that the AV missed, the endpoint protection missed, and highlight that to you. But how do you know if that's really high quality detection efficacy? It's actually kind of difficult to determine. There are third parties out there like MITRE ATT&CK that do their best to make sense of it. But a lot of ways you're trusting the technology of the EDR provider to say they are in fact finding things that otherwise would have gotten missed and are able to find that and pose those to you using the technology itself, right? So automatically telling you that, hey, we found this, we're learning you on it, go investigate. Which brings you to the next thing is the investigation capabilities. When you look at recaps of which EDRs are the best, so often they're very focused on detection capabilities, but forget about the investigation and response. So investigation capabilities really you learn best when doing a trial or looking at demos of the product. If you have this tool in your hand, how difficult is it for you to hunt with it? How difficult is it for you to continue an investigation and uncover more context to figure out the who, what, where, when, how, and why of what's being alerted to you. And how smart and how mature does your analyst on your team need to be in order to take advantage of those investigation capabilities. I mentioned threat hunting. That's another piece of it. Like there's the difference between investigation and threat hunting is a little bit of semantics, but with investigation, usually that implies someone alerted you to something, and now I'm using the tool to then look further to figure out what the context is behind that alert. Threat hunting is more of a proactive approach where you're actively looking for bad things. And usually a smart analyst is saying, hey, I kind of want to poke around and look for this type of activity and see if I uncover anything. And when you do, the next question is like, what are the remediation options? This is definitely the most overlooked part of EDR. Without good context, and without something built into the product that lets you quickly take care of it, all you're doing is adding more alerts and more information, but without really good ways to action on that. Lots of times you hear Gartner coined this thing a while ago called little r and big R in EDR. So how in depth is the response capabilities of the product itself, and how much work is going to have to be done by your team outside of the tool in order to respond to these threats once they are uncovered, and how long does that take? Because in an attack, every second matters. The longer it takes, the more open you are, more exposed you are to being hacked fully and being fully breached. And then for MSPs, I can tell you working for vendors for 20 years that MSPs are often afterthoughts when it comes to these tools. And there's good ways to figure out if they actually care about MSPs or not. One would be to say, okay, when something comes out on the roadmap, is it released to MSPs the same day as it released to direct clients? Often it's not. That's something that comes later, right? And obviously, you also want to look at integrations to your RMM tools, integrations with the other tools that are in your MSP stack, as well as things like multi-tenancy and simplicity of billing, things that non-MSP focused vendors rarely talk about and really don't want to bring up because it's often not a strength of theirs. So that's what you should look for when scoping an EDR. But the next question is like, is that enough? Do I need MDR, managed detection and response, on top of this? So again, this is a combination of saying I have the EDR tool. Now I need a 24/7 service that can actually monitor that tool for me, manage it, and help me respond when things are alerted in that tool. So do you need an MDR? If you're wondering, like, is the EDR enough? The first question I have is, do you have a SOC? Right? If you don't know what a SOC is, you definitely need an MDR. But if you know what a SOC is and don't have one, which should probably be 99+% of the people on this call today, that is something to consider. Like, do you have a team of people around the clock who can actually look at your EDR and give it the attention it needs to get full value out of it? And are the people on that team skilled enough to make sense of what's coming out of the EDR tool? Do you have processes in place so that when something bad does pop up, that you have a workflow to investigate further and respond if needed? Like, really, that's your general, like, how mature are you on the security maturity curve? The other question you should ask yourself is, where is your team spending their time today? Like, if you have an EDR tool and they're spending most of their time on wild goose chases, looking at false alarms, alerts that really don't matter, whether they're false positives or they're just noise, right? They're not false positives. They're just not necessarily critical or things you have to react to quickly. Or does your team actually have enough time to sit there and do real custom threat hunts and do the types of things that really only you should be doing in-house, right? Where no one knows your house better than you. So, if you have the time, that's what you want your team to be looking at if you have a mature security team in-house. And then if you do have a security team or IT team, how are they feeling? Are they overworked? Are they stressed? Most of them are. What's their bandwidth looking like? And what can you do to make their work-life balance a little bit more manageable? So as you ask yourself those questions, that'll help determine whether or not you need that MDR. So if you're running an EDR product, you really have three options. One is to manage it fully in-house. I've certainly worked on EDR products before that people do this, but we sold those products to mature security operation teams, ones that have 24/7 coverage around the clock, even if it's not, 3 or 4 people on call, like actively monitoring. They're at least on call and paying attention to what's happening. And they're usually to be well-resourced teams, both in terms of their people they're able to invest in, the technology, and the time that they have. A lot of those types of organizations, even so, are still looking for something to supplement their EDR. So saying, hey, I have a SOC, but they're not that mature or they don't have 24/7 coverage. We're looking for someone to augment what we're already doing today and take that burden off the team. So do a lot of the heavy lifting. So that's a supplemental approach. And then the other one is saying, great, I have this EDR tool, but I need someone to fully manage it. And that's where the MDR provider comes in. So if you don't have a SOC, if you have limited security maturity, not IT maturity, but security maturity, if your team is generally under-resourced when it comes to their security capabilities, then that's probably a better option for you. And here's my not so hot take of the day is that less than 5% of organizations should actually be running an EDR without an MDR. And that number is even lower if you're looking within the MSP community. So very few organizations out there have the bandwidth, the skills, the time, and the resources in order to run a 24/7 EDR tool and get full value out of it. And it'd be much better off, much more likely to stay protected and stay sane if they outsource that to a third-party MDR service. So that begs the question, if you're looking into MDR, you say, yep, that's probably me. We need one of these. What should you be looking at? 24/7 SOC coverage, like that's pretty much table stakes. If you're calling yourself an MDR these days, you're going to have a team of people 24/7. The question is like, who's doing 24/7 coverage? There are organizations out there that run their entire team in the US because they think it's higher quality. But you tend to get the vampire crew, as we used to call them, in the overnight shifts. Other ones will have analysts who are spread around the world, sometimes in non-English speaking countries, and they have really like a lower quality in terms of technical capability team covering you on nights and weekends, which may or may not be okay. Companies like ours, what we do is we do a follow the sun approach where we have people in England, Australia, Hawaii, and continental US, so that you do have top quality analysts and they all speak English and they're always available. Someone's always awake for you. The second question is like, with the MDR provider themselves, are they doing detection investigation for you, or are they just taking the alerts coming from the tool and kind of doing some basic triage? So the questions asked there is like, do you have a detection engineering function? So detection engineering is taking the data you get from an EDR tool and providing your own tech on top of that to find things in the data that might otherwise be missed, or to make sense of those alerts in terms of context, in terms of importance. And who is doing that work? Is it humans? Is it fully automated? Is it a combination of the two? You probably have different opinions. I have different opinions on which one you want there. But there's a lot of that work can be done, needs to be done by smart humans in order to really make sure you're not missing anything or you're not boosting your false positive rate too much. And just like with EDR, with MDR, like, okay, if you have an MDR provider that says we found something bad, what's the help that they're giving you at that point? Can they go ahead and remediate it for you, like with a human-led approach where someone actually is taking care of this for you? Are there automated responses that can option offer for you? And then how much guided response can they give? So are there analysts who will essentially hold your hand, so to speak, and give you step-by-step instructions on what you need to do? And how experienced you need to be to understand those instructions that are coming from the MDR provider. The best way to look at these things is by either trialing a product or asking for examples of incident reports or finding out from peers what they thought who had used the product. Speaking of which, once they find something, what's the communication reporting like? What channels do they use? Meaning, are they texting you if there's something bad happening? Are they calling you? Are they sending you an email? Is it all done within the portal? How are you actually going to find out when there's something that's going on in your environment? And then when they contact you, what's the depth of the reporting? Another thing on there is limits on communication. So there's a lot of MDR providers who say, like, you can only send us so many emails. You can only have this many minutes of conversation with us a month, and they cap that, right? Or they charge you extra when you go over that. So those are the types of questions you're going to want to ask there. And then one of the hardest things to do is determine the quality of the service, right? It's not always just the tech that you're dealing with, it's the human being on the other end of the line. What's their expertise like? What kind of services are they offering? So you want to find out the quality analysts. That's kind of hard to do because anyone can say up here, it's like, we have the best, smartest people in the business, right? How do you prove that? The best way to prove that is to ask them for what they're producing. Like, what are their threat intelligence reports that they're putting out? What's their community involvement? What's the business terms that they provide to you? Are they trying to lock you into a 3-year contract, or they understand that like you're probably going to want to evaluate them from a set period before determining how good they actually are? So look at the peer review sites, look at the amount of high quality or low quality content. Hopefully it's high quality that they're putting out in terms of their research, their industry reports, the threat research that they're doing. And then the last one is a bit of a mixed bag. So lots of times you'll see metrics being used by MDR providers, which like mean time to respond or MTTR, or mean time to detect or MTTD are the ones you see the most. Like how fast are we when we find something? And you'll even see some that give you guarantees on this. Those are good metrics to have. I'm not knocking them, but you need to take them with a grain of salt or dig deeper with them, because it's very easy for a vendor to manipulate their mean time to respond. So if you're doing everything completely automated on the back end, your mean time to respond is going to be super fast, right? Then there's other organizations that might do more human-led digging into a report, into an alert, and are concerned about that MTTR. So they say, hey, we get 15 minutes, we'll look at it. And if we can't figure it out after 15 minutes, we'll either close it or take a guess, or just basically shut down our investigation, because they don't want that metric to go up. So you're kind of punishing the vendor for saying, hey, we took 3 hours with 10 people to figure out what's going on because it was really unusual or really high profile or something that happened there that drew their attention. That will drive your MTTR up. So you want to have speed, you want to have quality, and you have to combine those two. And that's not always the easiest balance to get right. And it's not always the easiest balance to understand who has the best service offering in that sense. But something still to dig into. So this is my best shot at giving you the positioning of different MDR providers out there, and like why you would go with one versus another. The first group that I categorize are really the pure play, top rated MDRs out there. So when I say pure play, meaning you bring your own EDR technology out to the party, and the MDR service gets added on top and can most likely monitor a wide variety of EDR products that you have. So you're not beholden to one single vendor. You can pick from 3, 4, 5, sometimes way more than that. And the service provider will manage any one of those, right? And with these top rated MDRs, like the ones that are really highly regarded, you're most likely going to get really, really great service. So top of the line service, you're going to get really mature detection engineering teams. So they're adding their own tech on top of what those EDR providers are giving them in order to find things that are being missed or add context that otherwise couldn't be discerned from the alerts themselves. And they're going to be really strong at incident response. And the nice thing about that is you get the flexibility to work with your best of breed tools. You don't have to swap things in and out. So if you're using XYZ EDR vendor, it's not going to be a problem to then have them manage that for you. The downside of them that is that they're generally not designed for MSPs. They're high price, they're somewhat complex services, and they're really designed to partner with mature security teams. So if you're a Fortune 500, mature SOC, this is probably the MDR service that you're going to want to invest in. But if you're not one of them, it can get pretty expensive and pretty complicated really quickly. The next one are similar. They're pure play MDR providers, but these are more of the budget ones. So less highly regarded, usually competing more on price, where you still bring your own EDR and then add on the MDR service. So the advantage here is you have the flexibility to work with best of breed tools, but you can do that at a much lower cost than some of those top rated ones. The problem here is you kind of get what you pay for. Many of them are just taking the alerts that those EDR tools are giving them, regurgitating them back to you. So they'll triage some, but they're saying, hey, the alert came in, this is what it said. They're not giving you any more context. They're not helping you respond. And sometimes that adds more noise than you would have had in the first place. So they're not necessarily getting rid of the false positives that they're sending to you, or barely eliminating them. And then when you get that alert, you still don't necessarily know how to action on it. And you need that expertise in order to do it. And if you don't have that expertise, it's kind of just up to you to figure it out on the fly, or in some cases, pay extra to get their help. There's also single vendor product and services. So these are EDR vendors who then also have an MDR service that they offer in-house on top of their EDR. So it's still a product you have to buy and a service you have to buy, but they're all coming from the same vendor. So part of the expression, but the one you hear the most often is the one throat to choke. I like having one vendor that I can call, who are in charge of the tech and in charge of the service, and they don't have to bicker between each other, which is, I think, a benefit. So in theory, those vendors should be better at managing their own tool than third parties. I can tell you, having worked for top-rated pure play MDRs, that's not always the case. Lots of times those MDR providers are actually better at managing the EDR tools than the EDR vendors are themselves. And no, the other thing to think there is like the service quality is going to vary quite a bit from vendor to vendor there. So when you look back at the beginning of this presentation, I said, how did these technologies come to be? Why did people add them? The reason they added MDR, which for one of two reasons, is because their EDR tool was so difficult to use that they had to basically have you pay more in order to get the service to get any value out of it. That's really where a lot of the the EDR vendors, why they added MDR in the first place. And then there's the other ones who were a little later at the party who realized MDR is a hot industry. It's an up and coming technology. Now it's pretty well mature and ingrained. And they just wanted to do it to make more money, right? Essentially. So they're going for higher revenue, lower cost model, very similar to the pure play budget MDR providers. And then Huntress, I think, is a little different than all three of these. So one thing that makes us unique is that we are what we call managed EDR. So we combine the technology and the people. So you can't just buy an EDR product from us and manage it yourself. And you can't just buy our MDR service and have it apply to whatever EDR you bring to the party. We combine those two things and never split them out. We design the service and the technology together in-house. So the advantage of that is that the service is included. You do not have to pay us extra in order to get managed EDR versus just regular EDR. So you get the MDR included. And it's specifically, in Huntress's case, designed for under-resourced organizations. So what we are doing is trying to democratize security in order to bring those enterprise-level security features to those who just don't have the budget, the resources, and the expertise at house. So it's got a great value. It's why it really has a cult-like following on places like G2 and Reddit. You can read all about us. But this is not for everyone either, right? So in our case, the EDR is fully managed. So if you're like, no, I have a team in-house that I want to do our own threat hunting, we want our team to handle investigation or most of the response. Well, in that case, you probably need to buy an EDR product and then have an MDR service augmented on top, right? We don't let you just run the EDR on itself. Our customers are mostly MSPs, though not completely. They want someone to really either take care of it for them or tell them what they have to do to rectify the situation. They don't want to have to spend the time figuring out what the alert meant and how important it was and how quickly they need to respond. We do that for you. So if you're kind of half paying attention to this webinar, double tasking right now, this is probably the best 1 minute section to pay attention to, which is if you're considering these different options, this is how I would bucket them. The pure play top rated MDRs are great, but they're super expensive and made for mature teams. And if you're not a very mature security organization, then that's probably going to be a little bit outside of your reach. If I could give you one piece of advice, it's avoid the budget MDRs, right? The ones that are just competing on price. Again, they are trying to charge you the most money while offering the lowest cost to themselves, not necessarily investing in their technology, not necessarily investing in their people, but just trying to get a piece of the action, so to speak. And you typically get what you pay for when you go with those providers. Not all of them, but most of them. The single vendor product and service is a little bit more of a mixed bag. There are vendors out there which I think are really great, right? So EDR vendors that have an MDR service on top, they're both high quality. And you have others that are more like those budget MDRs that are just tacking on a service because their EDR tool is impossibly hard to use, and they're trying to make some extra margins on top of it. So I kind of give you, this gives you a good lay of the land of where you might fall in here and what type of product that you're looking at. If you do happen to fall in this last column for Huntress, I'll give you a quick overview about what we do. So everything we do at Huntress is managed. So in this case, we're focused on managed EDR, but the company itself is focusing on protecting those who need the most help, right? The understaffed, under-resourced, under-attacked orgs. The phrase we use here is the 99%. We know that most security tools are made for the 1% out there. We're made and built for the other 99%, and that's the business that we focus on. Like, we don't sell to Fortune 500 companies. We'd happy to if they wanted our product, but it's not an area of focus. We are built for MSPs and for under-resourced organizations from SMB up to small enterprises. And that's because we looked at the marketplace and we know endpoint security is critically important. We know having an MDR service is critically important to stay protected. But most of the tools that are out there are not built for you. They're built for someone else. So whereas other tools, you have to do all the work, with Huntress, we do all the work for you. All of our solutions, whether it's our EDR product or other products, are fully managed by a team of really smart, badass human analysts. The second thing is, with all of those other tools, you have to have the expertise in-house in order to get value out of them. With our tools, because they are fully managed by our 24/7 SOC, we put all the expertise in there for you. We tell you, we put the context in, we know what to look for, we know what matters and what doesn't, and we work with you or take care of it on our own in order to make it right when we do see something. And the third thing is, most of those tools out there are in a feature war, particularly the ones selling to large enterprises. They continue to add incremental features that really have very little value in order to continue to charge more for their products, and stay ahead of the competition. Whereas we have a different approach, as we know we could probably collect 20% of the data to get 80% of the features. We know which threats and which attacker tradecraft are affecting MSPs, SMB, and small enterprise the most, right? And we can get coverage to take care of almost all of those scenarios without having to worry about the edge cases that are like nation state attacks on Fortune 500 companies. That gives us the ability to have an enterprise level security product that's affordable and simple to use. So any organization, regardless of your maturity, can turn it on day one and instantly be significantly safer than you would have otherwise. And that's why we've been able to elevate SMBs for many years now. So we have close to 150,000 organizations, 5,000 MSPs that we work with, about 3 million endpoints managed, about 1 million identities that we also protect on top of that. And we have a range of products there. So the first thing we want to do is protect your endpoints. That's where EDR comes into play, the product really we're focused on today. We also have an MDR product that specifically looks at identity protection, identity threat detection and response, or ITDR is another one of these DR categories, more of an emerging one. So we're looking for account takeover and other identity related thefts there. And then we also have a really awesome security awareness training product that is, again, can be fully managed by us to help up level your teams and reduce your risk profile. And earlier in the presentation, I said we have a cult-like following. It's true. We have now been the leader in G2 reports for EDR for something like 9 reports in a row. If you look at the G2 scores, it's Huntress in the upper right corner, and then everyone else far to our left. Most likely to recommend, easy to set up, best results, best usability, goes on and on. We really love our partners, and our partners show us that love back, which is great. So very quickly, I'm going to give you a quick overview of our products, and then I'll take some questions right at the end. So I mentioned manage EDR. Again, the idea here is to protect threats at the source, which is the endpoint. Everything's fully managed by us, 24/7 by our team of our human-led SOC. One thing that's great is when we call you and say, hey, we found something, or we need your help to rectify the situation, you know for a fact in that situation, whether we text you or whether we give you an alert, that it's worth looking at, because our false positive rate is less than 1%. So which that means is over 99% of the time when we send an incident report, our partners say, yep, you were right. That was actually something bad. I'm glad you found it. And less than 1% of the time do they say, no, this was actually turned out to be a false positive or something that is maybe bad behavior, but not necessarily malicious in there. And when you need our help, our customer support scores, our CSAT scores are amazing, 98.8%. And it's been within 0.1% of that for the last 3 years running. Because we are partner centric, because we care, we have those high scores to back us up. And so what specifically are we looking for? We have a bunch of different features within the product to help detect malicious, shady hacker activity. So we have something called ransomware canaries to detect pre-ransomware activity and encryption of files. We have malicious behavior detection, which looks at attacker tradecraft and the techniques they're using. And if we see any of that malicious behavior, we know it's something shady going on. We're able to stop persistent footholds, which is the way attackers get in environments and stay in environments, which is one of the main techniques that they utilize as part of the attack chain, and one of the biggest things that most EDR and endpoint protection tools miss today. And we can do things to reduce your risk profile, like find all your open ports out there, your unsecured RMMs, and let you know about them in order to reduce the chance that they get taken advantage of. And we do find something, we can proactively isolate it automatically. We can give you the option to remediate with the click of a button, or we can go ahead and remediate it on your behalf automatically. And if it's something that we do need your help with that we can't do on our end, we'll guide you through that in a way that even the most junior IT analyst will understand. Some of our other products are MDR for M365, very similar to our managed EDR product, except instead of focus on endpoint threats, we're focusing on account takeover and other identity related threats. So this product is specifically today built for M365. We're looking for things like suspicious logins, right? And unusual VPN behavior, shady IPs being used. So this is unwanted access where attackers are essentially mimicking what looks to be like a good person, but are actually them on the other screen accessing your environment. And once they get in there, the most common thing we see is business email compromise, where they set up suspicious inbox rule forwarding rules in order to either mask what they're doing or to commit financial fraud and other types of attacks. And then I mentioned our security awareness training. So I love our security awareness training tool because it's unlike any of the other ones I've ever worked on in my career. The things we hear about security awareness training is first is that admins absolutely hate security awareness training tools because it is a time suck and it's annoying. But with Huntress, admins love us because management can be easier. You get set up in minutes. And once you set it up, it's pretty much set it and forget it. We'll pick the phishing scenarios to send out. We'll choose the lessons if you want us to in order to send out to your customers and your employees. And all of that is being informed by our SOC. So we are not an education company. We're a security company with an education tool, which really sets us apart from a lot of the other awareness training products out there. Learners love it because we have really fun lessons that are delivered on a reoccurring basis rather than having them sit down once a year for some truly painful 2-hour lecture. Ours are, you can see Dee Dee, our pint-sized hacker here. They are story-based, which helps people learn and retain them, and they're also more entertaining. When I started the company, people said, "Oh yeah, some of our customers and partners, they like have like fan groups for the characters and like to sit around and talk about them and the stories at work." And I totally thought that was BS and was like, that no one would ever do that. And since I've worked here, I was like, oh, that is actually true. People love the lessons and find them entertaining, just like they're watching a real animated show. And some of our creators actually have worked and won Emmys working for like children's animation shows before. So it's a really talented group. And most importantly, hackers hate it because unlike most security awareness training tools, ours actually works because those lessons are memorable, because they're actionable, and because they're being chosen by our SOC and designed by our SOC, you know that they're actually highly impactful and not just trying to check a box. So if you're just looking for a check the box, cheapest security awareness training out there, we probably aren't the best for you. If you're looking for something that's going to take all the burden off of you as an admin, that you're not going to hear complaints about and will actually work, we're a great option for you. And when you do business with us, remember that like we care. So we have a high customer satisfaction score. You get a detailed dedicated account manager with you every step of the way. And one of the things I love is we do annual contracts here. So we don't lock you into multi-year contracts because we think, every year we need to prove ourselves. And if you want to walk away, that's completely your right. We should be doing enough to keep your business, not keeping you basically in a prison cell of a long-term contract. And even if you are not one of our customers, there's a lot of great community stuff that you could take advantage of, but even more so if you are one of our partners. So every first Tuesday of every month, we have Tradecraft Tuesday. If you're not subscribed to that, go ahead and do that. That is a non-sales, non-vendor focused look from our security researchers of what tradecraft we're seeing out there, what the attackers are doing and how to respond to it. We also have our community fireside chat for MSPs and our product lab where our founders show how we're building our company and our product in public, and you can follow along and enjoy the ride. A couple last takeaways. The two things to walk away with today is first, take a free trial, right? It costs nothing. You get the full product with the 24/7 SOC backing you up. You can look at M365, managed EDR, or awareness training, security awareness training for free. And you get the fully featured version of the product. And even if you don't want to buy anything from us, you still can get something from us, which is the Neighborhood Watch program. So if you're an MSP, we will give you, with no strings attached, internal Huntress licenses to protect your house, right? So to protect the MSP, you and your employees, not your customers, we will do that for free, pretty much for as long as you want us to. So you get 24/7 coverage and across all of our products. So for us, we like to show off what we can do, and for you, you get the confidence knowing that you're protected by a world-class security operations center and managed Huntress security at absolutely no cost to you. So that's something to check out and take advantage of. All right, Jeff, that is all I have for my main presentation. I'd love to see what questions have rolled in.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a few questions. If you do have questions, make sure that you post them up in the Q&A or the question area here on Zoom. I'm going to also, as we're going into questions, I'm going to launch a poll. So if I can launch this up here real quick. Here, if you don't mind, just taking a moment just to be able to give feedback here on your level of interest. I'm going to leave that up for just a few minutes, so go ahead and just answer that if you're here on the webinar. One question for you, that this was actually one from me, and I'm curious of this, and then I know we've got 3 or 4 questions lined up right here too. What do you see as the activity level? If I'm an MSP that's got 30 clients, what do I really, as an average MSP doing a decent job on security, how many times should I expect to hear from Huntress that something's going wrong?
Yeah, it depends on your clients. I'm sure if you're an MSP, you know that some of them are a little noisier than others. So if they're noisy, you're going to hear from us a bunch. Again, you have the option for us to just take care of threats on your behalf. So if something happens at 2 in the morning and it's something we can handle on our own, we'll just take care of it. When you wake up, you'll see that incident report saying what we found and what we did about it. Other things, you will have to help us guide through that in a guided response to take care of it for your clients. So the lift is really low. You're going to have a minimal amount of tickets. We've seen studies where comparing us to other MDR providers and then EDR run on its own, and it's a significant drop in the amount of tickets that have opened because you have Huntress and you have that 24/7 coverage on the other end.
Cool. All right, so Dave was asking here, I just received a CompTIA smart brief discussing how Fin7 bolsters I'm going to say AU kill tool to disable EDR protections. How is Huntress handling that?
Yeah, we have tamper protection in our product. So that's one thing. I don't want to comment specifically on that technique because it's always better to have the researchers tell you our pros and cons of stopping that or ability to stop that. But we do have tamper protection in the product. I know, having worked for endpoint protection vendors for 15, 20 years, the 2 biggest sources of failure, or the 3 biggest sources of failure, are 1, not deploying it out to your entire environment. And like we see that all the time, like, oh, those machines weren't actually protected. 2, mismanaged, misconfigured, right? Endpoint protection is notoriously, hey, we would have stopped it, but you turned off the feature that would have found it. That's why having a fully managed version is great. And then the third one is when attackers can go ahead and just turn it off without you knowing about it. And that's why you should have tamper protection turned on in the product as well.
Cool. A couple questions that are in here. What does the pricing look like for Huntress?
I could share it. I don't have it on this here. It's relatively low, so we tend to compete pretty well on price. Certainly less than larger vendors out there, and our product is specifically designed for MSPs and to have that value there. So I apologize, I don't have it off the top of my head on the slide, but we can get it to you after this call, no problem.
Yeah, and if you do have a question like that, you can always put it in there of saying that the poll question, I like what I'm seeing, I would like to get more information. And then Seth and his team will make sure to reach out to you. We'll get that Seth to you, that list right away.
Our pricing is pretty straightforward. Like, we don't do funny business where we have like a fake price that we tell everyone it is and then negotiate it down by 80% every time. Pretty much we have a list price that's our price, the sticker
Cool.
price.
All right. What does the new client onboarding process look like for the MSPs clients when partnering with Huntress?
It's really easy. It's something that can be done matter of minutes or at worst matter of hours. So if you look at the free trial or neighborhood watch, you'll see how quick, easy it is to onboard. So it's something that happens like there's almost no work to be done on your end. So essentially you just have to map your tenants and then we'll start protecting them on day one. We don't need a learning period. We don't need, a month to roll out. It's pretty much once you get started that day, you're instantly going to have a significantly higher level of protection than you would have otherwise. And we also have some good onboarding materials to help train you and your team. We're rolling out a new partner portal as well that will give you all the tools you need both to co-market or market services to your users and also teach you how to onboard all of them as well.
Cool. I'm going to group about 6 or 7 questions into one here because I don't want to name specific competitors out there and put you on the spot of one versus another because there's a lot of it of how do you compare versus this vendor or that vendor that are in here. Give your best of where I know you already did it, and maybe you even want to pull up that slide again here with it that you had there with the different vendor or the different options on it. Maybe just talk through of that of where compared to the other vendors that are in the MSP space. Like I said, no need to mention different vendors by name. I know there's a ton of them that are asked about here. Give your best pitch of like how does Huntress maybe reiterating how Huntress really stacks up the best against the others.
Yeah, and obviously I'll be biased. I'm not interested in trash talking specific vendors, but you could go on places like G2 and find out a decent amount about most of them, and Reddit and figure out like what do people like and dislike about them. A bunch of the ones I get questions about often fall into this pure play budget MDR category, where they are providing very little technical value. They're not doing detection engineering. They don't really have a robust team of experts that know what they're looking at. They're really just trying to regurgitate those alerts, triage the obvious ones, get rid of those and send them back to you with little context, and you get what you pay for on those. A good chunk of our competitors fall in that category, and they try to just compete on who can charge the least amount, which is always a warning sign. I tell you on the vendor side, when companies do that, it's usually something where you're like, well, they're trying to buy up market share, but in a year or two, as their product quality declines because they're not investing in it, people tend to leave and they have high churn going there as well. So that's where most of them fall in. I would also say that we are really unique because we've been doing it longer than most vendors out there. So when Huntress started, MDR wasn't even a category term. So a lot of the technology that we have in the tool itself, so the things that we're looking for, such as like persistent footholds, for example, that's the type of deep level enterprise level technology that you're rarely going to see in a lot of the budget EDRs and budget MDRs out there. Right?
Cool. All right, very good. Joseph was asking, how are you dealing with groups like Black Suit or Royal Ransomware and other ransomware groups?
Yeah, we so one of the great things about Huntress is that again, we're not just a team of people who build products, and we're not just a team of analysts and responders, that we have an entire threat research arm. So we have our strategy when it comes to these things is both have a team of threat researchers who are constantly looking for the latest in hacker tradecraft. That's why that Tradecraft Tuesday webinar, that monthly webinar exists, is to show you what we are finding and how we are dealing with it. When it comes to ransomware groups in particular, the interesting there is the payloads don't really vary that much, and that's where your like automated AV is going to probably detect the payload. We're very focused on the left of boom, right? Looking at the techniques of the tradecraft that our attackers are using in order to deliver the payload, in order to persist in an environment, in order to move laterally to get the most damage. That's why that behavioral analysis is so important, because when we see that shady behavior, we know they're on the path to then dropping the ransomware payload. And hopefully we catch that pre-ransomware activity before the payload is ever dropped. And that's most of the time what we do. So.
Cool. All right. Alan was asking here, I'm on contracts with other vendor products. Do I need to wait until the contract terms expire?
Salespeople are very motivated, so no, you don't need to wait. Call them. There's a good chance we have like a vendor buyout program for some of them, which means you might get the ability to buy out the rest of the contract. We don't have that for everyone, for every vendor, but it's something that we can make hopefully work for you. And if you have to wait, we'll wait there and we'll help you out when you're ready. So again, you can still take advantage of the neighborhood watch program. You can still free trial it. You can still listen to all of our community research and our community webinars that we put out there, and we'll wait for you when you're ready.
Cool. All right, good deal. Someone was asking a number of times here, does Huntress support one-man MSSPs just starting out?
We do, but there are yes. So the simple answer is yes, we have a minimum of like just a few endpoints. I can't remember what it is, but we don't really turn anyone away in that sense. So.
Okay. All right, good deal. And I just ended the poll here. I noticed that was still running in case you hadn't answered that here. Let me see. Does Huntress work with resellers and VARs?
Yes, we do.
Okay. And then Wes was asking, can you, Seth, can you show the slides with the awards again?
Sure. Yeah,
There you
I
go.
love showing our awards. I literally just looked up because there's a Wes on my team to see if it was my own teammate with us, but it wasn't. It's a different Wes. So thank you, Wes, for that. Yeah, we love G2. So I would say in general, like there's a lot of third party. There's Forrester, there's Gartner. Gartner doesn't actually do a Magic Quadrant in the MDR category. Forrester does. They only really care about the big enterprise focused vendors. So even other vendors I work for that are pretty well known aren't on those vendor comparisons. So they are helpful, but take them with a grain of salt. The same thing for peer review sites. So like those are nice because they're actually looking at what other people have to say. So G2, PeerSpot. We don't really deal with Gartner peer insights because they tend to, again, just look for enterprises, but it's still a good source if you are, a really large organization. But G2 is the one that we get the most love on and that we really pay the most attention to because people are pretty honest with their feedback on how we're doing. And we read every single review that comes in order to make sure that we are listening to our customers and our partners. Just like when you post something on Reddit, there's probably someone from Huntress looking at that and making sure, we're keeping on track and make sure that we are focused on our partners.
All right, awesome. I've only got one more question that's listed on here. Abdul was asking, does Huntress have automated remediation or is it only manual by humans?
It's a combination. So it's sort of like a bit of a gray zone. Almost every alert that comes in, a human being will look at and determine whether it's legitimate or not. And that's why our false positive rates are so low. And we can do that in a way that is still really fast turnaround. So that MTTR, MTTD metrics are really well above industry standards in that sense. Once we find something, we either can take care of it for you. The click to approve option essentially is you click a button and we've already sort of pre-programmed the remediation. So they are automated in that sense that they're just going to go ahead and go through. But we have very few automations where we find something bad and it automatically responds, because what happens then is the vendor makes a mistake and they start responding automatically without a smart human double checking that is actually what you should do. And that's where massive problems come in. We have huge false alerts and you have remediations like isolating machines, that taking them offline, which are mistakes in those situations. So we are very much a human-led service in that sense.
All right. Greg was asking here, and this is more a question for me than it is for you. Here, will there be a recording of this webinar? Yes, absolutely. So everyone that registered for the webinar, you should receive a recording of the webinar within the next 24 hours here. So we'll get that posted up for you and sent out. Also is that we post all of our webinars for MSP Success on mspsuccess.com. And so if you go into the menu on that and go into the webinar section, you will find all of the past recordings on there, a lot of great content that is out on mspsuccess.com. Other than that, Seth, we are all out of questions here. So if you do have further questions, make sure to reach out. Seth, what's the best way? Is it that QR code there? What's the best way to connect with you and the team?
The QR code is specifically if you want to join the Neighborhood Watch program. If you want to sign up for a free trial, just go to huntress.com and you'll see the button right there. If you want to connect with me, LinkedIn is the best way to do it. I can guarantee, as Jeff and I were talking pre-recording, I am the only Seth Geftic in the world. It won't be hard to find me on there. So yeah, feel free to reach out.
All right, I've got one more that snuck in here right before I signed off. Would I need other tools like vulnerability management or pen tests?
Yeah, those are peripheral to what we do. Vulnerability testing and pen testing are not something that we do. So.
Awesome. All right, great deal, Seth. I appreciate you taking the time to share all this with the audience today, and look forward to working with you more.
Great. Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, everyone, and thanks for attending today's MSP Success webinar. Have a great day.